Hey, tailgaters! Ross of the Pigskin Tales podcast here. Feel that summer heat? It's not just the sun, it's the thrill of upcoming college football season, stoking the coals. So get ready for the season. Dive into the history books with Homefield, the premium collegiate apparel brand from Indianapolis. Homefield crafts incredibly comfortable gear designed with iconic vintage nods over 150 colleges. A library of history right on your chest. Homefield is the Indiana Jones of collegiate apparel, uncovering hidden gems from school archives. Unique mascots, logos, and even unforgettable moments frozen in time. Visit homefieldapparel.com and shop the archives. Homefield Apparel, where comfort, nostalgia, and the spirit of college football history unite. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com.
You know, I always thought of myself as a big football fan, and especially a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And you guys know that. You hear me on the air. But I think I met my match, because this guy is in the Hall of Fame. It's coming up as our guest today. Harv Aronson joins us in just a moment to tell us his story.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pigpen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another episode where we have a guest on talking about another interesting aspect of football. And this one's going to be very entertaining. It's a gentleman that comes from Western Pennsylvania, like yours truly. His name is Harv Aronson, and he's from the Pittsburgh area, attended Slippery Rock University. Boo, because that's one of our arch rivals of Edinboro University in the PSAC. But hey, we like Harv anyway, and we brought him on. Harv, welcome to the Pigpen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, most definitely. No, Harv, you've got a really interesting background, and we're going to get into that in a second with some great things of fandom with the game of football. And you've really touched a lot of aspects of it. But I guess we want to start off with, what brought you into being a fan of football to be writing books and articles and doing some of the projects that you're doing today?
Well, my history, actually, I always give credit to why I became a sports fan to the one and only Roberto Clemente. When I was 12 years old, and I can still see it in the back of my mind, my father's watching television in his bedroom, and it was the 1971 World Series. And I walked in, and Roberto Clemente's at the plate. He hits a home run, and from there forward, I was a baseball fan, sports fan, and Roberto Clemente became my idol. And then I just started following sports. So that was 1971. I've been watching sports and following ever since. Always had a passion for. My original goal was to be a sports broadcaster. That didn't work out, but I have a minor in journalism, so I wrote for the high school newspaper, sports. And then when I got to Slippery Rock, I was writing for their school newspaper. That's where I got involved in radio. I was a sports broadcaster for them, as well as a DJ. And then I became sports director for their college station, which was WRCK. And so that was my goal. It didn't work out, but I kept writing after that. And so I've written for a lot of different websites. I've had editorial letters published in a lot of different things. And that's my passion, is to write. And so I used to actually have my own website called Steelers Hotline. It was dedicated just to the Steelers. That was for about 15 years. I wrote that website. And then I just started writing for other people. So I've written for a number of different sites, currently writing for a website called Abstract Sports. They cover all different sports. And it's just whatever you want to write about. The owner of that site, Kyle Richards, will allow me to write any kind of article I want. I write on a quarterly basis for Gridiron Greats magazine, which you're familiar with. All football stories there. And then recently the YouTube channel that I started up and doing videos on sports history. primarily 60s, 70s, 80s, but occasionally I'll throw in something from a different part of history in a different era.
Now, listeners, just a note to you: you may have noticed on the front pages of Pigskin Dispatch and Jersey Dispatch, we've been posting some of Harv's videos on there, talking about some relevant sports, like he's talking about. They're very interesting, very historic, and some great video and some pics in there. So we appreciate your passion for the sports history, and thanks for letting us share that with everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean, I love sports history. I still watch sports today, don't get me wrong, but I just really feel fortunate having grown up in the 70s mostly. I was born in 59, and I don't remember a whole lot from the 60s, but during the 70s, I was more or less a young teenager. And then through my teen years, that's where I really gained a lot of my knowledge of sports and retained a lot of that. But I always say I feel lucky that I grew up in that era in the 70s, because it was such a great decade for sports, especially in Pittsburgh, obviously.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Same era. So I grew up that same thing. Being a teenager in the 70s was a pretty cool thing. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit with that
Sure.
that piece of information you just gave us, that you love all sports. Okay, yeah. You have to take any Pirates, Steelers, Penguins, Pitt Panthers out of the mix. Anything with the city of Pittsburgh out of the mix. What's your most memorable moment of watching sports? And it can be professional, college, high school, but take the Pittsburgh teams out of it.
Okay, so we're going to take Pittsburgh out of it. I could go with a lot of different sports. I mean, well, I guess what I'd have to say is I went to I think it was the U.S. Open or PGA Championship, Oakmont, 1978, I think it was. And so I had never been to a golf event. I mean, I love all sports. I like watching golf. I mean, and I thank Tiger Woods for a lot of that, because he really not only spurred my interest, but everybody's. I mean, he's probably the best thing ever happened to golf.
Absolutely.
But he's made the sport exciting. But back then, my next door neighbor up the street was a golfer at North Hills High School. He went to Ohio State on a scholarship for golfing. He wanted to make the PGA. He never did make it. He came close, but he got on the Canadian Golf Tour. His name was Dan Plazarski. So Dan and I decided to go to the Oakmont Open or PGA. I can't remember which one it was now. But we went just to the final round. And he just kind of led the way, because he knew how game of golf works and how to follow it. And I swear to this day, that was one of the most exciting events I've ever seen. I didn't realize how much fun it would be to watch a professional golf match, but we had a blast. It was so much fun. And we saw guys like Johnny Miller playing. Jerry Pate, I think, was actually the winner. Jerry Mahaffey, it was between Jerry Mahaffey and Jerry Pate, if I remember correct. They had to go into sudden death, but we had a blast that day, and I really enjoyed it. So I do watch golf.
I got to see like Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer.
I don't think Nicklaus and Palmer were there.
No,
I don't recall, but I know I did. One moment we were watching Johnny Miller tee off, and I can still remember it. We were on the tee off to the side, and he sliced the ball, and you could hear the ball going over our head. And I was like, wow. And then actually it came down to a sudden death playoff on the 18th hole. And when we got to the 18th green, because what we did was we followed a group of golfers. This was his plan: follow a group of golfers, and then when they get to the final hole, we catch up with the leaders and watch the final holes. So when we got to the 18th hole, the stands were so packed we couldn't see anything. So I guess I was about 17, 18, somewhere around there. I said, well, I'm going to miss it. So I climbed up the side of the stands all the way up to the top and looked down, and it came down to I don't know who was in the lead, but it was one stroke difference. And if the guy makes the putt, thing's over. If he misses, it goes to sudden death. Well, he missed, and everybody just went flying for the first hole, and I never got to see the finish. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
He didn't miss the fall because somebody was shrieking as they fell off climbing up the back of the bleachers. Did he?
Yeah, I was crazy back then. I mean, it was pretty high up. It was probably a good 20 feet up off the ground. But that was when I was young and athletic.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, well let's go get back into the Pittsburgh swing of things here. Now, you had a website for 15 years. You wrote a
Mhm.
lot about the Steelers. You're
Yeah,
very passionate about the Steelers. And
very.
one year you were so passionate that it got recognized nationally. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, this is a fun story. What had happened was Visa charge card company, obviously, used to have a contest called the Visa Hall of Fans Award. So every year, and it ran from I think '99 through 2005, something like that. So in '99, they created this award that if you wrote an essay on why you should represent your team in the Hall of Fame, they would pick one fan from every team, and they would give you a plaque, and they would put that plaque in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it would stay on display for a year until the next year's winners were presented. So I entered this contest online and forgot all about it. I didn't even realize I had entered a thing by the time I got a call from this advertising agency, and they said you're a potential winner in the Pittsburgh Steelers for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Visa Hall of Fans contest. I said, "Oh my god, I forgot I entered that." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll let you know later this week whether or not you're the winner." I'm like, "Yeah, this is cool." So I got a call later the week. "Yeah, you're the winner." I'm like, "Oh man, what happens now?" They said, "Well, we're going to give you two tickets, field tickets for a game this Sunday." They told me like on a Friday, so I had to get to Pittsburgh by Sunday. So they said, "We're going to give you two field tickets. Before the game starts at the 50-yard line, we're going to present a plaque to you. You'll be on the Jumbotron and all this other stuff." I was like, "Wow, this is
Very
crazy."
cool.
So I get to the game. Sure enough, they put me right in the end zone, like the first row in the end zone. They came to get me before the kickoff and walk out to the 50-yard line. Jerome Bettis is standing there. He was injured at the time. The president of PNC was the one presenting the award. So we get out to midfield, and he does his little speech, hands me this plaque, and I'm looking up, and I'm on the jumbotron. I'm like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" I don't. I was like on cloud nine. Um, I guess I would have been. Let's see, that would have been 23. I was about 40 years old, something like that. So I got this plaque, and I knew people that had season tickets for the Steelers. So I know some people that were in the stands had to have been there and seen it. I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I went back to walk to my seat, and I hear some people in the fans chanting "Harvey, Harvey." I was like, I was out of my mind. So then I get back to my seat. This big guy stands up in front of me, and he says, "Hey, congratulations." He says, "I'm Charles Davis. I played for the Steelers in 1974, won a Super Bowl with them." I was like, "Okay." Now a professional
Wow.
football player is stopping me and shaking my hand. So I have a picture taken with him. So I thought that was the end of it. And so it turns out that Visa, if your team got to the Super Bowl the year you won it, you get two tickets to the Super Bowl, all expenses paid.
Oh
And
boy.
they let me know that. And so I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm going to go to the Super Bowl," because I thought the Steelers were going to make it. Well, this is a year that they lost to New England in the championship game. Cordell Stewart, I think, was the quarterback. And this was the year that Josh Miller punted, and Troy Edwards, that's who it was, ran out of bounds on the punt. People may recall that.
Right.
So they had to repunt. He repunts, and Troy Brown, I think it was, returns it for a touchdown. So my heart sank. I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'm like going to the Super Bowl." But it was still fun. So at that point, I said, "Well, this whole thing's over with." Well, that's not true. So I get a letter in the mail from one of the guys that won it from '99, because I won it in 2001. He tells me all the winners get together every year at the Pro Football Hall of Fame to celebrate and welcome the new members that won the award and everything else. So I said, "Oh, okay, this isn't really neat." So I go up to Canton in 2002 with all the other winners. Now, not all of them show up, but a lot of them did from previous years. So when I get up there, one of the first people I see is Big Dog from the Cleveland Browns,
Oh
who
yeah.
is worldly famous.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm among the elite fans here." Big Dog's there. There was a guy by the name of Tim McKiernan. He was Barrel Man from Denver. You may have seen him.
Right. Yeah.
Barrel Man was there. There's a guy from the Eagles, Birdman, used to call himself. He was there. Mr. and Mrs. Seahawk. I mean, it just goes on and on. All these famous fans, and I'm like, wow, I'm among this big group. And so they actually, at that point, were giving speeches for the Hall of Fame. They would have it on film. You go up, you give a speech being the fan of the year, and then they put the plaque on display. And so I'm going through the Hall of Fame, and there's my plaque among everybody else's. Like, wow, it's so cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Very, very neat.
that's where that story ended.
Okay. Okay. Well, I got to ask you a question. Okay. You know that they had to get a bunch of entries in there, and they probably, a lot of them were saying the same thing. Hey, I have my rooms at my house decked out in black and gold, and I go to every game and season ticket holder and, whatever, so what was it that put you over the edge? Do you feel, as part of your essay that you wrote to get into the?
That's a good question, because I really didn't feel like there was anything special about me. I mean, when you're in Steelers Nation, I've always said nobody's better than anybody else because it's such a great fan base. Every Steeler fan's a great Steeler fan. I mean, there's no question about this. It's the best fan base there is in any sport. But what I wrote about was my website, and that I used to make it an annual trip for about 4 or 5 straight years, going down to Steelers training camp just to watch them.
Okay.
And I was living in New York at the time, so I had to travel down about 8 hours to get to training camp. And I made it a point. I always wanted to be there. So for about 4 or 5 straight years, I would go down there and just hang out.
Is St. Vincent College in Latrobe?
Yeah,
Okay.
St. Vincent's. And so I go down and try to promote my website, and it was just training camp's a blast. I mean, if you've never been there, you should go. It's just so much fun. And you would think just sitting there watching guys practice is not a great thing, but it's a lot of fun. And then you can line up along the pathway to go back to the locker room, and the guys will stop and they'll sign autographs. They'll stop for photographs and things like that. So Steeler players have always been congenial like that. They're a great bunch of guys, even throughout all the years. They've never changed.
Well, we're holding out hope this year. The PFRA convention's in Pittsburgh this year, and we're making a little road trip over to the Latrobe Historical Society on Friday, the July 29th, I think it is. And we're holding out hope that the Steelers training camp, because they haven't announced dates yet, that it'll be that week that they'll be in there. And it's a Friday, so maybe even it's like Sirius Radio's there with the guys are there doing it because it's the night game. Who knows? We're hoping something happens so we can see part of training camp while we're in Latrobe. But we get a nice tour of the Latrobe museum there with the Latrobe Athletic Association. One of the first pro team, the first paid pro football team in the world. And so we're hoping that we can see some of that stuff while we're down there for the convention.
Darren, you've never been to training camp?
I have not been to a training camp.
Oh my gosh, man, you got to go.
Yeah, I do have to go. You're right. And
it's
maybe
a lot of fun.
This year, maybe I'll get to spend a little bit of time there. So I'm excited about that. So, okay, let's get back to your story though. So you have, this award, you get to meet the other guys and everything. And you did something with that knowledge and with these meeting and, talking to these other fellows and maybe some ladies too that have won.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you took your journalism experience and you did a little writing on that. So why don't you tell us about that project?
Okay. So about 2012, the book came out. I decided a couple of years before that. And when you mentioned ladies, yeah, there's another famous Browns fan, Deborah Darnell, Bone Lady. And I don't know if you've ever seen her or not, but she's got her own little bone car, I think she calls it. It's this sedan with a big bone on top of the car. So
we've here where I live in Erie, we're 100 miles from Pittsburgh, 100 miles from Cleveland, 100 miles from Pittsburgh. So we're a mixed fan base here. So we get polluted with the Bills and Browns stuff here too in Steelers country. We call it Steelers country, but they claim it otherwise. But yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny when I met her, because the first time I met her, she saw me. She goes, "Oh my God, a Steelers fan," and she wears this little skirt with these orange stockings and little bones all over her skirt and shirt and stuff like that. And she goes, "Yeah, I got something for you." And she turns around and lifts up her skirt, and on her rear end it says "Steelers suck." I had to get a laugh out of that. But yeah, so I thought it would be a good idea to write bios of all these fans, just the ones that I met in the initial entries into the Hall of Fame up to that point, like 2010 or so. So what I did was I contacted each one of these guys, and a lot of them I stayed friends with for years. I've lost touch with a lot of them, but most of them actually. But so I was friends with a lot of them. I had emails for them and everything else. And then there was another guy, you may have seen him, Kansas City fan, Lynn Schmidt. He goes by Weird Wolf. I'm sure you've seen him on television. He's got the claws and the face paint and everything else. He helped me get a lot of the emails together. So I told him I want to write a book profiling all these Visa Hall of Fans Award winners. And they were all in agreement. And originally, the proceeds were going to go to a cancer foundation. And they all agreed because we were going to donate money. They volunteered to give their information. So the other part was paying for the book, which was really cool because I found a publisher willing to do the book, but we had to come up with the money to pay for the publishing costs. So what we did was a lot of the fans, and I was in a Steelers fan club at the time, we all went to our clubs and asked the fans if they'd be willing to throw in a few dollars to help pay for this book. And once you know it, in a matter of weeks, we went above and beyond the number we needed to publish the book.
Wow.
And one guy that helped a lot, unfortunately and sadly, he died a few years ago, Raider Ron from the Oakland Raiders, helped out a lot with his fan base. So I got all their profiles put together, and I didn't want to use the NFL too much because I didn't want to go through the legalities of getting permission to mention the NFL and logos and things like that. So we called the book Pro Football's Most Passionate Fans. And basically, it's still on Amazon. You can go search for it. You can buy it still. And it just profiles all the fans that, I decided to put in the book. Now, we dedicated the book to Tim McKernan, Barrelman from Denver, because before the book could get published, he had passed away unexpectedly. Actually, he got ill. So I talked to his wife, and she wrote the foreword of the book as we dedicated it to him. And then there's several other fans that had passed before the book was published, so there's tributes in the book to them as well. And somebody said this will be a great coffee table book, and the sales didn't really do real well, but you know what? It was fun to do it. I always wanted to write a book. I never thought I'd be able to get one published, and here we go. I had one that is actually out there. So it's a lot. And I do have plans to write more books in the future for sure, because I enjoy doing it so much.
Well, very cool story, and I love. I didn't realize you did it for a charity too. That makes it even that much greater. So that's a great thing that you did, and everybody else participated in it. That's excellent, and got the whole football community together. When you can get fan bases to do things together, you're doing something special.
Well, here's the neat thing about that Visa Hall of Fans Award and going to Canton was that when they invited me up there, they had created an organization which is still in existence. It's called the Pro Football's Ultimate Fan Association, PFUFA. And I was a member of them for a while. But the cool thing is that you go to stadiums, you see these fans fighting like idiots, amongst each other. And we're all in the same boat trying to get the same thing. We want our team to win. When I got to Canton amongst all these other fans, and they were from every other team, we got along like really well. And there was no fighting and no arguing, and everybody just had a great time. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And it really was a lot of fun.
Okay, well, that's some excellent stuff there. All right, so you got some writing projects that you mentioned, Gridiron Greats and Abstract Sports is the name of the other site, and
yes.
So you have those things going on, and making the videos on YouTube on your YouTube channel. Why don't you give folks the name of the YouTube channel again? So
yeah, it's called Sports History Remembered. You'll easily find it if you put that in, Sports History Remembered. And it's only going to be history. There's not going to be anything on there current. It's always going to be about history. I try to focus on 60s, 70s, 80s, but every once in a while, there'll be something that I can recall from history that I really feel like should be focused on. And we'll have a video on that. Every Wednesday I do On This Day in Sports, and I'll just look for an event that happened on that day. As you know, you posted on your sites the John Elway drafting, which happened the other day in 1983. And so Abstract Sports, I'll just write whenever. Kyle's very cool about, if I have a topic, he'll publish it. And so if I have a good idea for a story, I'll write it and send it over to him. And then Gridiron Greats, Bob will tell me in advance, what kind of story he wants for his magazine, and I'll write it for him. I just did one for him on Franco Harris. The next one is going to be the relationship between the Steelers and the Bears. And then what I did was I focused on the 1970 draft when Terry Bradshaw got drafted. And so I don't know if anybody knows that story, but the Bears and the Steelers had to toss a coin to decide who got the number one pick. And so the Steelers won the coin toss and thus selected Terry Bradshaw. So the article I wrote for Bob is, well, who did Chicago draft and how many quarterbacks they've been through since 1970? The Steelers have had far fewer, while the Bears just have a rotating quarterback situation where they could have easily ended up with Terry Bradshaw if they won the coin toss. So a lot of people may not know that, but that's how that number one pick for 1970 was decided.
And a couple of those Bears quarterbacks ended up being Steelers reserve quarterbacks. And you have Tom Zach.
Mike Tom Zach. Yeah, exactly. Jim Miller.
Yeah, right. So,
Miller.
Miller went the other way. He was a Steeler and then went to the Bears. He was after the Steelers.
True.
Oh, interesting. Oh, good stuff. Well, Harv, we really appreciate you coming on here today and sharing your story. Very unique. We love the passion. We love being a Pittsburgh fan. That's great stuff. And God, we hope to be able to collaborate and do some more stuff with you. And we'll keep showing your videos as long as you'll let us.
Yeah, absolutely. You can feel free to post them anytime. I really appreciate you guys doing that for me. It helps me, and I hope I can help you. I actually did one today. I don't know if you've seen it today. I just posted it today, but it was sort of like an online resume for myself. And I mentioned all the sites I write for, and I've added all your sites on there, Abstract Sports, and it just kind of flashes the logos, and then it flashes the URLs for those sites. So if people want to go there, they could actually pause it and be able to grab that URL if they want to go visit any one of the sites.
Well, very cool. We appreciate that. We'll have to make sure we grab that video, embed it. We have a little bio going for you on the website. So when we
saw that,
if we could put that on there, so we'll include that too, just so people can learn more about you. And just listening to this podcast, learn a lot about you. And we really appreciate you sharing your passion for sports and your lifelong passion for sports. And continue on, brother, because we love it. And we thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, sometimes my wife will tell me I'm a walking encyclopedia for sports. I retain a lot of knowledge up there. And if anybody out there is a boxing fan or an MMA fan, those are like two of my favorite sports now too. MMA especially. I'm a huge MMA fan.
All right, my man. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Have a good evening, and it's good talking to you, Darren.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com. sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.